Okay, hi. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Claudia. I'm working with Ephimera, and today I have the absolute pleasure to interview James Fox. All right, hi James, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
All right. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing just fine, thank you. And yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. We're in a bit of a weird heat wave in Toronto here, so I can feel it in the house. It's getting really warm. Or
Yeah,
maybe that's just me.
yeah. No, I'm in an old country house, and actually I'm on the upper floor, and it gets quite hot up here as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, in the same
Okay,
boat.
cool. Yeah. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about your work, and I have a lot of questions about your process. And to be quite frank, when I first saw your work for the very first time, I was shocked to hear that it was photography. And
Oh,
I looked at it for the first time and I was like, it looks like just 3D renderings, or it's just been manipulated, it's just digital art. And then as I kind of read a bit more about you, I was like, wow, this is incredible, like the macro photography and all these textures and details. And what I really like about your work is the way that it's so fluid. Like you just have these lines and these ripples coming in and out of these textures. And I was just so excited to hear that I'm able to interview you today and just talk a bit more about that.
oh well, thank you so much. Wow, I really appreciate that. Yeah, and yeah, thanks for saying that. I get that from time to time when people hear that my work is just photography. So and it's always it's always great to kind of see that reaction that people. Whoa, I didn't know that was actually not digitally manipulated. So yeah, I always get a
Mhm.
kick out of that for sure.
Awesome, cool. So, the very first question I had for you, and this is kind of before we start talking about your work, I just wanted to know a little bit more about when you decided that you wanted to be an artist and start making work. What was the first medium that you kind of explored? Did you start with photography or was it maybe something different? What was that first step you took?
Oh, well, I mean, if I can start, way back, if a brief summary, I was always really into art and drawing and things. Growing up in public school and high school, anytime there was a subject in class that I wasn't interested in, I'd kind of, be sketching doodles in my book when I shouldn't have been. So I've
Hmm.
always kind of had that kind of desire to do art. Um, as I got a little bit older, a lot of drawing, and eventually I kind of went into graphic design as a stepping stone to get into computer animation, which was kind of what I really wanted to do for a long time. But it was about 6 or 7 years ago. I picked up a decent camera, and I always kind of liked photography, but for the longest time, it wasn't anything that I took too seriously. I just kind of enjoyed it. But about 6 or 7 years ago, I got a decent kind of entry level camera, and I just started shooting everything. I kind of remembered why photography was so satisfying and so great. So I just started shooting everything, and then I think it was about maybe half a year after I started just kind of shooting whatever, just playing around, I really got into macro photography, and I kind of started honing what I could do artistically in that genre, and eventually I kind of came across the technique that I shoot with now. So yeah, it's been a long journey, but yeah, I'm happy to be here. Yeah.
Good, good. That's great to hear. And I love how you mentioned that kind of the first bits of that were like the drawing and just that I feel like that like often reflects in the work now from what I've seen is just the way the lines kind of move throughout the images. It definitely reflects like a very painterly style, which is good.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I guess my next question would be, so when I look at your work, I'm often thinking about how much of it is like a physical set that you have built, and then how much of it is digitally enhanced.
So it's nothing is really digitally enhanced that you wouldn't do with a photo that you took of anything. So if you took a photo of a landscape, the way that you might enhance it would be adjusting the exposure or the levels, highlights, shadows, maybe do some color correction. Sometimes there's, little bits that you want to kind of clean up or edit out. But the photo that you took is basically what existed when you took that photo. It's the same for my shots. Those are actually, sometimes the shots in real life size, they're about an inch. because it's macro, so you're getting really, really close. But that is all real. It's real models that I model in 3D, and then I print them out and I immerse them in the resin and the pigments, and it creates that kind of effect. So it's all real. The only things that I would do, I kind of have a process that's called it's a practice that a lot of photographers use. It's called photo stacking, and it lets you take a shot and you move the camera, a fraction of a millimeter, and you do that many, many times, and then so you have kind of 50 different slices of images that are all in focus, and they get stacked together, and it creates an image that is completely in focus and razor sharp, and it's a way of getting a super sharp macro image. So I use that sometimes, but yeah, it's all real. It's 100% real.
Wow. And so I'm just thinking about, to get that sharpness, you must have a really, really good lens and also just really great lighting to capture that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and because it's such a small, thing that I'm shooting, you don't really need big, large lights or anything like that. You just I use adjustable lights, and I have a couple, LED lights that are flexible, and they can change brightness and change color. So they're really handy. I do have a nice lens that I like to use, and it's a Sony, 90 millimeter macro, and I use a Laowa 25 millimeter 2.5 to 5 magnification lens. So that's the one that I would use to get super, super close. And you can get so close with that lens that, the real life size of what I'd be shooting would be, maybe 2 to 5 millimeters across. So the whole image is about, that you could fit on your thumbnail. But when it gets blown up, you see detail in small things that you would never usually typically see. And especially with the way the pigments flow around, it's just it's kind of, I found it a very kind of interesting and surreal and dynamic process for getting images. So.
Wow. So those sets you create, they must be so precious. And how small are they?
Well, the smallest things that I've done a couple shots that have sold, and they, like I said, they would probably be about 5 millimeters wide, in real life size. But yeah, typically the largest thing that I would print would be about an inch, maybe a little bit more, depending. So yeah, I have a bunch of little things that I've printed out and have used, and sometimes they get thrown away, sometimes I keep them around. But I usually just will model something and print it, and then for the sake of the shot, and then after it's gone, it's kind of fulfilled its purpose at that point in time. But
wow. And when you say printing, is that 3D printing?
yeah, it's 3D printing, and there's kind of a couple different types of 3D printers, but the kind I use is a resin printer, or SLA, I think it's sometimes called. And so basically, you have your model, and it gets imported into the printer, and it prints it slice by slice using UV resin. So a UV light will shine up with just whatever slice of that model, and it will harden that resin, and it does that layer by layer by layer. And it actually prints upside down as opposed to from the bottom up. So and you get some great, that's the one that I use. It's just kind of a cheap printer, but it works pretty well for my purposes. So, and the reason I use a resin printer over one of the other ones is because you typically can print things much smaller and still get a great amount of detail. So yeah.
And that sounds like it takes a lot of time to print. I mean, on average, how much time are you spending on each image?
Well, because my things are so small, they don't take too long to print. Usually it's a couple hours. If I'm doing, for some reason, sometimes it might be a little bit larger. It might take a little bit longer, but luckily I'm able to print a lot of things in a shorter time period just because I shoot small. So I print small. But the process, there is the process of kind of like the idea. I do some sketches and some thumbnails to kind of plan it out in my head, and the time it takes to model something, which can take either a long time or not so long, depending on how complicated the object is. But then there's the printing, and then you have to cure the model so it hardens properly, and I have to paint it and treat it, and then I'm able to actually do the pigments around it and do the shooting and processing. So sorry, I rambled a little bit there, but yeah, it's kind of a multi-step, multi-day process from start to finish. But it's a very satisfying way to work, and it's always a surprise to some degree on how something is going to turn out. Sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it's back to the drawing board and try it again and see what I can do. So.
Wow. And so speaking of process, so when you're imagining kind of these images and what you want to create, do you already have that mapped out in your head, or is it something that maybe more so impulsive and you've just thought of it and you're like, oh, I have to do this right now?
It can be both. Sometimes I have something that I has been simmering for a while or percolating, and I'm not quite sure exactly what I want it to be, but I kind of have this hazy image. And sometimes when inspiration strikes, it's just bam, it's like this image, and I just get started on it right away when I have the time to do it. And yeah, it's kind of weird. I try to be as open as I can with how the ideas come. I find the more I try to make things rigid, either it's not so much as a pleasant experience or a fulfilling experience for me. So I try to keep things open, and both with letting the ideas come and just whatever ideas they may be. I mean, this weird stuff that pops into my head, I don't know sometimes. I probably, but that's part of the artistic process, is just kind of letting stuff come naturally, I think, and yeah, being nice and free to do that.
Do you ever search for inspiration? I know some photographers and artists will take walks purposefully outside or maybe go to a specific area where they find a lot of inspiration. Do you ever go search for it?
I don't usually. I mean, if for some reason, if I'm in a creative drought, so to speak, which happens from time to time, sometimes you want to be creating something, but whatever, the creative force just doesn't seem to be dancing with you that day. So it's from time to time, it is, I'll look at some of my favorite artists' books, or I'll listen to some of my favorite songs that seem to kind of spark that creativity. But typically, I just kind of do what I want to do in life. I just kind of, if it's relaxing, if it's working, and different events or different songs I've heard, or movies, I think they just tend to percolate sometime after. I don't listen to a song and then try to interpret that song, but I may listen to a song and like a couple days later, something will just kind of pop up, that might have been related to that. So I think that's kind of how my filter goes, is I just kind of experience things and then they kind of bubble up, at their leisure whenever they're ready to. But that's a great question. I think, from time to time, I definitely, you just have to search out some things that kind of spark that creativity from time to time.
Mm-hmm. And creativity. I wanted to ask you about some of your black and white work, because the first time I was introduced to your work, it was the very, colorful scenes and those textures. And then I saw some of the black and white imagery, and I felt like there were two different tones going on, like from the same feeling I got from the colorful images where I wanted to reach out and touch it, and it was so vibrant. It all of a sudden shifted with the black and white imagery. So could you talk a bit more about that, and maybe if you were trying to do something else by doing black and white?
Well, actually, I mean, black and white is interesting because I would say that the majority of people, I think, probably maybe prefer my color work, or it tends to have a little bit more of that, whoa kind of, because there's multiple colors. It's usually very vibrant and they're flowing with each other. I think black and white is great for if you want to strike a certain mood or a tone. I personally like it more or less, not because I want things to look somber or dour necessarily, but in black and white, things like texture and form and composition can just really pop. If they're used right or effectively, and once in a while, it's just kind of a great palette cleanser, actually, from color work, because you can do something and it's just so stark, and it's just a different way of putting emphasis on different things in photography, I think. Yeah, hopefully that's a decent answer. I think people like black and white for different reasons, but for me, it can really make certain aspects of my work pop out. If, like I said, if I want to focus on composition or a texture or whatever, it can help me put focus on those aspects of a piece, for sure.
I totally agree with you there. I mean, when I think of black and white, and even when I saw your pieces, I'm paying more attention to the light and where the light is hitting all these textures.
Sure.
So that's really interesting there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So I want to talk more about your recent work, like Ebb and Flow. that you just tokenized on Ephimera. And I noticed that some of your recent work has almost like this character inserted into it, and there's like very identifiable, I don't want to say people, but it's almost like you could insert a character into the image, and it's not just these textures and abstractions. So I wanted to kind of ask you about the decision behind that, and why that's kind of shifted there.
Well, I mean, you know, I started it when I first started shooting this technique. It was all just purely kind of abstract, flowy stuff. There wasn't really too much recognizable imagery. When I started getting into the crypto art space, I was thinking of pieces that I would actually, you know, like I wasn't playing around as much. I was putting a lot more thought and, you know, time to really let these kinds of ideas percolate, as I said earlier. The reason I included some more identifiable imagery is because it helps you to latch on to something, I think, in a certain way. So even though I have, you know, figures in, you know, these pieces, I don't necessarily need to have a specific narrative when somebody was to first see it. So if I'm not talking about it, if they just see the image and there's no title or anything, I don't necessarily need somebody or to have this, oh, I know exactly what that is, because I really like how people can form their own connections with my work. So if I keep it abstract, but there's still something for them to kind of see, like in ebb and flow, there is a, you know, a figure with a cube for a head, and they're just kind of, you know, floating there with the waves and the vibrant inks kind of flowing around them. So you might come to a conclusion that's, you know, so similar to what the piece is about, but you don't necessarily have to. I guess it's a lot of it is just finding that feeling or finding that emotion and keeping it abstract and just presenting it to somebody, and they can make it their own piece. You know, they can really decide what they see in it. So that's kind of what I like about abstract stuff, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I really love that. Some of my favorite photography, even when it's portraits and the face is abstracted, maybe there's like a flower in front of someone's face or like a hand and you can't quite see who the person is. I find those images are really, really great to connect with, because you can almost insert yourself and kind of reflect on it as a self-portrait or maybe someone else, and you can make your own narrative, which I think Ebb and Flow does a really, really great job at doing that.
Oh, thank you. That's yeah, that's I agree completely. You know, abstract art and photography is, I feel in many ways it's much more of a realistic kind of interpretation of what the human experience is, because we're constantly filtering things through biases and you know, different kind of abstract concepts and constructs and stuff like that. So, you know, everything that we see is usually filtered through whatever our unique experience is, and human beings are not always the greatest at looking at things, you know, objectively or you know, realistically. There's always some sort of a film over what we see and think about things. So I think if you show an abstract image, it cuts through all that, and you don't have to worry about, am I looking at this the right way? Whatever way you're looking at it is probably the right way, which is great about abstract work. You know, generally speaking, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. So switching gears a little bit here, I wanted to ask you, how did you get involved with tokenizing work on the blockchain? Was it something you heard about, or maybe something you researched a little bit about and just purposely went out to look for?
Well, actually, no. I mean, I didn't really know anything about it. And in, you know, there's so many other amazing artists and people who are much better you know, can represent or explain crypto art much better than I can. But I actually got a message, you know, out of the blue one day from another great, amazing artist called Metageist. And he said, hey, there's this, you know, I really like your work. It was super nice. And he said, you might want to check out, you know, this marketplace, this crypto art. And he was referring to Super Rare. And I thought, okay, well, I know nothing about this. I don't know anything about crypto art at all. I don't know that much about cryptocurrency. But, and I almost didn't. I thought, you know, I don't know. I'm just shooting stuff and posting it. You know, I'm just having a good time. But on a whim, I thought, okay, I'll submit to Super Rare, and I'll see, you know, how it goes. And you know, I got accepted, and yeah, ever since then it's been great. You know, I still feel like I don't know, like I'm just kind of like cruising along here, and I don't know what's happening, but I love it because I just keep my head down and I do the work that I want to do, and if people like it, which so many people have been so nice and so supportive and just amazing. It's an amazing
Mhm.
community, and I love being a part of it. So yeah, that's kind of how I got started. Thanks, Metageist. But yeah, since then it's been, yeah, I can't even remember how many months it's been. I think it was maybe just before May or something like that, or May or June when I kind of first really got into the swing of things. I could be wrong, but yeah, it's just been amazing. And now with Ephimera, I mean, just the tool set for artists has been amazing. It's so clean. There's quality of life features that are so nice from an artist's point of view. So yeah, it's been a great journey so far. I can't, hopefully, keep on going, and it's been great so far. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. That's really great to hear. It's actually really refreshing to hear that you were really new to the space when you first heard of it and kind of tokenized work and put it out there and just to see what happened. And I think that, a lot of people watching tonight, maybe who want to get involved and put their art out there for the first time, I think that helps maybe if with any intimidation that they might feel, that not every artist who is tokenizing knows every single thing about blockchain, that
Absolutely.
we're all just artists here trying to, show our work and make work. That's all we want to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a Texas size 10-4. I mean, like, yeah, there's so many people that know so many more, so much more than I do. But yeah, it's a great point because if you're an artist, you can hop on to certain platforms, you can apply for certain platforms, and you can just create your work. It might take a little bit of extra time or dedication. I don't know what everybody else's experience has been, but for me it's been amazing. And even no matter what happens, once you really get into the crypto art community, you have just this wall of amazing artists that are, like I said, very supportive and kind, and they want everybody to succeed. That's been one of the standout things. So it was a little bit daunting for me just because anything that you do for the first time can be a little bit daunting. You're always wondering, am I not knowing something I should know? Or, that's kind of the case for most people when they first start out. Anyone who wants to put their art out there, I would say do it. Just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you tokenized for the first time, was it kind of like a domino effect and all of a sudden you wanted to just keep putting work out there?
Yeah, a little bit. Well, because I wasn't sure at the time, when you first start tokenizing, there's a lot of questions you might have. How much should I tokenize? How much should I, sell my art for? These are all personal questions, but you still want to find them out from some people, or at least I did. I had a bunch of questions, and I wasn't sure if I was doing the wrong thing or if I could be doing it better. You sift through that stuff and you find out what works best for you, and you can alter how your process or how much you kind of tokenize. It's a learning process, but it's also a personal one for sure. But it definitely is. I mean, once you put out something, and if somebody buys it, or even somebody says a nice comment about it, it's any sort of encouragement is always nice, and it can get addicting for sure. Looking at other art, buying, collecting art, and making it, there's a dopamine hit whenever any of those things happen. So
For sure. And you have sold a lot of works. Is there ever a pressure on you, like to maybe make something else quicker or maybe make something to fit a certain aesthetic or, knowing what your next move is?
at first I kind of, yeah, that's a great question. It kind of shifts and wanes because, sometimes I'll have great weeks where there's, multiple sales, or, there's a good first bid kind of right off the bat. And sometimes, I've put out pieces where, it feels like crickets for a little bit, which is, all part of the ebb and flow of it all. But I think it's just you'll get used to the way that things move for you. So at first, maybe I felt like, oh, I should be putting out something every week, but that's not sustainable unless your creative process or your work, your work ethic will allow that. So I think it's just whatever works for you. A lot of people prefer scarcity. Some people, don't care about it as much. But yeah, like I said, yeah, that's another personal thing. There's times where I felt a little bit of pressure, but it was kind of pressure that I was putting on myself. Nobody else was saying you need to do this, you need to put another one this week, or else it's all that internal kind of monologue that everyone has when they're wondering what they should be doing or shouldn't be doing. So
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to ask another question that's a bit different, but it's something that I have been asking a lot of artists in the space who have just been working through this COVID-19 pandemic. And it's that has the pandemic affected your work at all? Just kind of as we shift into this, period of uncertainty, and we're all at home, and maybe we have more time on our hands. Maybe some of us don't have a lot of time on our hands. So has that affected the way you work?
yeah, I mean, I think COVID has affected everything, like even things that we might not have thought. But that's a great question, by the way. It has affected the way that I work because I work from home from my other job. Um, I'm not driving, a half an hour, 40 minutes to work each way. And even that extra bit of time, from a practical standpoint, allows me more time to actually work on, on my crypto art. And as far as just COVID affecting my work, it has greatly affected my work because, your emotional state, at least mine, has gone up and down with this thing. And I live out in the country, so I'm pretty comfortable. I don't have to worry, as much as maybe, people in big cities and things like that. But, you know, I remember I did a piece fairly early on, and it was definitely inspired by when COVID first hit, and the first time I went outside to get groceries, and it was new, and everybody didn't know what was going on, and you just felt like it was around you, like, or that it could be around you. And I did a piece about that, and it was very, yeah, it. And I think since then, a lot of my work will change whether I'm feeling, silly or happy, or if I'm feeling a little bit anxious or depressed. These emotions come and go, and that because COVID is a pretty heavy thing, I think a lot of the time it might, bring out a little bit more anxiety or kind of, darkness, and that you will seep into my work for sure. Yeah, even if I'm not conscious of it, I know that it does.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like hopefully when this is all over and we've moved on, there will be definitely just an abundance of work from artists, just like making work about this topic, because it's hard to not affect you. It's everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is this is an unprecedented thing for people of many generations. Like, of course, this there's been plagues and things in the past for sure, but for us, it's just this came on, and wow, we're right in the middle of it. It's pretty heavy for sure.
Hmm. All right, so we're just 2 minutes until the end here. So I wanted to end off with a quick question just about what advice would you give to an artist who's looking to maybe tokenize for the first time, and they're not really sure where to start, or kind of what steps to take to learn maybe all this terminology, or where to go? What advice would you give them?
Well, I would say first and foremost, don't be afraid to reach out to somebody. I mean, if you're on kind of Twitter, or whatever places or communities you're kind of being exposed um, to crypto art in the first place, find somebody and don't be afraid to reach out to them and just maybe ask a couple questions. I mean, fortunately for me, a nice gentleman met a guy. He mentioned that I should, might want to look into this, and he answered so many questions for me. He was super great guy. So there is someone like that for, I think, everybody. You might just have to ask a few people or ask a few questions. And the other thing is, just start. If you have work that you're proud of and that you want to put out there, just start doing it, and don't worry too much if it gets traction right away or not. In a lot of cases, like anything, it's like a slow build up. More and more people will see your work, so just kind of keep going. Like, it is always that kind of cliche thing, but one foot in front of the other. You just keep doing it, and then that's the best way to get to your goal. Some people are able to do it quickly. Some people, it takes a little bit more. But yeah, and I might not be the best guy to ask advice, but just from my own kind of experience, I would say, yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to people, ask questions, and yeah, just hop in.
Awesome. I think that's the best advice, is not thinking about it too big picture, but just, one day at a time, one foot
Yeah,
after the other. Just what
exactly.
step can I take today that will make my work better, or maybe I want to like post it today. Just small steps. Doesn't have to be the big picture right away.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
really great advice.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, cool. So it looks like we are nearing the end of our time here. All
Well, that
right.
did go
So
by super fast.
yeah, right. Just we flew through it. So thank you so much, James. It's
Oh,
it's
it's
been
my
a pleasure.
pleasure. Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And thank you so much to our Project 2020 and the Vancouver Biennale for having us as well. And I hope you all have a good night.
Adios.
Okay. See ya.